Not so long ago, in a world full of strife, a man born a wolf, living a dual life. With magic in his veins, he walked the school hall, learning the arts, answering the call. But fear was a cloak he had to wear tight, hiding his truth, keeping darkness from light. Those who were scared turned away in despair, yet he bore the burden, he chose to take care. Now the times have changed, the monster's no longer scared. He's retired from magic, but his stories still flare, with tales of heroes, of legends so grand, selling dreams of the past across this vast land. In the shadows he lingered, where darkness would creep, protecting those kindly, never losing sleep. A guardian of secrets, a keeper of lore, he wandered through echoes, hearts wanting much more. No longer the wolf, but a sage with a pen, turning back the pages, reliving back then. His stories weave magic in the minds of the young, of battles and triumphs, where songs will be sung. Now the times have changed, the monster's no longer scared. He's retired from magic, but his stories still flare, with tales of heroes, of legends so grand, selling dreams of the past across this vast land. Listen closely, hear the whispers in the breeze, of knights and of dragons beneath the ancient trees. The wolf in his wisdom has so much to share, from magic to courage, loving hearts laid bare. So gather round, children, let the stories unfold, of a man who had magic but chose to be bold. Through tales of old, his spirit survives, a wolf in disguise, in every heart he thrives. Now the times have changed, the monster's no longer scared. He's retired from magic, but his stories still flare, with tales of heroes, of legends so grand, selling dreams of the past across this vast land. So remember this lesson as you look to the skies, even hidden beneath, we see with our hearts, not our eyes. For every wolf's journey, there's magic in the tales of kindness and courage, where love prevails. Not so long ago, in a world full of strife, a man born a wolf, living a dual life. With magic in his veins, he walked the school hall, learning the arts, answering the call. But fear,
because this just doesn't work as well. Honestly, I can't tell if it's working at all. Okay, mouth is a little centered. I don't have a full body PNG set up for the new model. But I don't know why my camera just isn't wanting to work with VTube Studio. None of the settings on it changed, but it's freeze framing me. See, I can be moving, then it just freezes. It's like the calibration's off, but it won't let me recalibrate. Because the calibration won't even focus on me. I'm looking straight ahead. The calibration's not working at all. I don't know if media pipelines is not working right. See if I do a lower setting. It's not even activating the calibration. Severe scuff. But most of the time I can at least figure out what's wrong with it. But eye tracker's not doing a damn thing. And calibration's not even zeroing in on me right now. And this is on the lowest setting and it's not doing anything. That's not even moving the calibration screen. Okay, it's on the right camera. Yeah, even it's on the lowest setting I have, and it's not doing anything. I don't know what's going on. If my drivers are just fucked or what. The CAD cam works, but that doesn't help me any good. If I'd had the PNG, I might consider trying to do the recording. At least the PNG of the model. Because no one really sees my mouth move that much anyway. But this is not even workable. Bah! I really don't want to mess up on the reading it's supposed to do tonight because I want to do Byrd proud. But this isn't communicating at all. So I guess I'm just gonna go and cancel tonight. I hate to do it, but the PNG just wouldn't seem right with it. At least not a model change in the middle of... It's like going into a second session of this book. And I mean, I'm cut off at the waist on the PNG. I guess I need to go ahead and set up a full body PNG as soon as I can, but I just can't see it doing it this way. But thank you for showing up. Like you're. It says I've got more people here. I don't know who all would be here, but there's no one else tried to redeem anything. But I think I'm going to go ahead and cancel for tonight. I need this to work because it really is for family. Even if it does, in this next chapter, have a very gruesome train wreck and the firebox man and the coalman literally having their skin peeled off, and cows with pieces of wood stuck through them. And this next chapter is actually really gruesome, but I can't do it looking like Torso Boy. Oh, sorry about that. Have a good night. Still not sure what happened to my camera. But I really need to do the reading tonight. Yeah, Salty. Oh, that ad's coming up. Damn it. You missed the wonderful technical difficulties. I'm not exactly sure they're over. But at least the model is moving. Yeah. Going to go ahead and do ads. Be back in a few. Okay. During that ad, I made a backup PNG just in case. Sure, want my ear movement, or my head movement, or anything else. But at least have me opening and closing my mouth. Which, at least it'll have me obviously opening and closing my mouth. Tonight we are starting another section of the book. Part 2. Gone to Dakota. Hey, Darth Parm. You got first and second? And third? Okay. Of course, for some reason, going into another chapter, there's another damn song for me to sing. Luckily, it's only one verse. Sing me a song with a chivalrous theming, courage and love in a weird, saddening strain. Bold in its tenor, but soft in its dreaming, soft in its dreaming of sorrow and pain. Chapter 9. Is audio? Audio. Okay, it's in the yellow anyway. I put a limiter on, so hopefully it won't peak out as much. Anyway. Chapter 9. Working on the old C7. On my way to Morristown, South Dakota, I saw many new and strange scenes. I had to unload, water, and feed the steers at the Fort Worth pens, reload them in freshly sanded cars, and at Wichita, Kansas, I had to unload, water, and feed. And again at Kansas City, Missouri, I attended them. After leaving the Kansas City area, the railroad track followed the Missouri River bend for many miles, giving one a fine view of the valley and the river with its many motorboats going up and down, with fishermen and pleasure seekers on board. We went in sight of Omaha, Nebraska, and on the Sioux City to Iowa, where I again unloaded, watered, and fed the steers. By then they were beginning to get very lank and weak. Some were going blind for want of water and feed, being too wild to drink and getting only 3 bales of hay to the car for 45 head of steers as feed. I unloaded at Sioux City about 7 in the morning and loaded up about 3:30 that evening. I saw to it that the steers got the 3 bales of hay to the car and had plenty of water. Sioux City was a lovely place located in the most fertile country that I have ever seen. While there, I visited the Morris and Company packing plant and learned the value of many parts of a cow that was thrown away with the butcher outside of a packing house. There isn't anything lost but the squeal of a hog and the bawl of a calf there. We pulled out of that city at about 4 one evening, and about 1 the next day, as the train moved to the rate of 30 miles an hour across the level plains of the southern part of Minnesota, near the small town of Worthington. I perched myself on top of the caboose with my back to the outlook, taking the scenery of the whole new world. I was a lonely cowboy for sure. I was leaving behind my many friends and my family. Right then I had no intention of ever going back to Texas. With those thoughts in my mind, and seeing no bright prospects for my future, only to follow the range country all my days, I was suddenly jarred back to reality when the caboose began to buck and lung, jump and swing to and fro. I had ridden many miles in my day on top of a bucking bronc, and a few cabooses, but none of them had ever behaved that way. I rolled over the caboose, catching anything that I could grab to try to keep on top. I certainly didn't care to take a drop to the ground or be left on that lonesome prairie. As soon as the critter quit cutting capers, I could look ahead, and I saw the cause of all the jolting. 17 stock cars were lying with bottoms up or on their sides and partly standing on the end or leaning partly against other cars. Cattle were leaving them in every direction, some in good shape, some hopping off on broken legs, some trying to drag themselves away from the cars as best they could. Many were writhing in agony and death. Beyond the dilapidated stock cars lay a big freight engine in a cloud of steam and dust. I got quickly to my feet and bareheaded, for I'd lost my top piece. I quickly started for the engine at no slow pace, and behind me came the conductor and the back brakeman. Though the conductor was badly bruised up, he could stand. I reached the engine service car, lengths ahead of the other two men. When the brave engineer saw me, he said, "Lad, give me your hand. I'm stuck." I was sickened by the sight. The man stretched out his hand towards me. I waded through water and steam and took the outstretched hand. I gave it a hard pull. To my utter dismay, the skin slipped off like a boiled potato peeling. I had to step back to keep from being scalded myself. A steam pipe had broken, and the water was pouring into the firebox and onto the engine, making a cloud of heavy steam. The head brakeman and the fireman were crushed and mangled beneath the coal feeder. The engineer had his left leg broken, and the throttle lever was stuck through his thigh that held him fast. I'd never seen a poor fellow die a more miserable death than he did. His flesh was cooked by scalding water and steam. As soon as we had time to collect our scattered thoughts, the conductor started in a trot for the nearest station to report our accident. The brakeman and I went to work trying to free the cattle that were being crowded and trampled to death. We couldn't help the 3 dead men because of the intense heat causing them to be boiling in water and steam. It was pitiful to see the dead and crippled cattle, too. Some had pieces of timber from the cars sticking clear through their bodies, while others had broken legs, ribs, and horns. Some were unhurt. I have never seen such a collection of destruction. I have thought many times in my life about that tragedy. The conductor soon came back from a station bringing the section hands with him. People were now beginning to come from all directions to the scene of death. Then the work train and the wrecking crew came, and soon swung the massive hoisting cranes and lifting into place, lifting the engine from where it lay and the lifeless cooked body of the engineer. He was tenderly lifted from where he lay and placed on the ground. The broken and mangled bodies of the fireman and the head brakeman were taken up and placed beside him. Tears came to my eyes, and many of the onlookers wept aloud. 2 days after the wreck, the track was rebuilt and was clear, ready for the train to pass over. This wreck detained me on the way about 4 extra hours. That cost the St. Paul, Milwaukee, and Chicago Railroad many dollars. The spreading of the rails was supposedly the cause of the wreck, as it was on a curved grade. Thus I resumed my journey, leaving some 160 head of cattle either crippled or dead. The train slowly wound its way around the valley and climbed the ridge beyond. I watched the setting of the glorious sun as it sank behind the horizon in the west, leaving its golden light on the white clouds scattered about. It was the most beautiful sunset I can remember. We neared the mouth of the Grand River, which runs west through South Dakota and on into Wyoming. The Missouri was on a rampage caused by the melting snow and spring rains. Farther up the mountains, the hills and valleys shone bright and clear in the May sunshine as the train sped on up westward and wound its way up along the side of the mountain stream, with its sparkling clear water dashing into foam among the rocks stung red, and sharp curved bank clothed in lovely green and yellow lovely green with golden willow and ash with box elder strung along its banks, and the occasional log cabin built near its banks. Such beauty helped me forget the awful nightmare of the train wreck. I resolved to someday own my own home by a beautiful mountain stream, and settle down with a wife and have a family. Mostly these thoughts were short in duration. After crossing the Missouri River, we were upon the noted Sioux Indian Reservation, which was to be my future home as long as I worked for Morris and Company, and the headquarters ranch was located near the dividing line between North and South Dakota, about 82 miles west of Monbridge and 80 miles from what was known as the Four Corners, where the Dakotas and Wyoming and Montana all corner. When I reached my destination, Morristown, a bunch of men came from the old C7 house, which was a quarter of a mile from the stock pens. I asked for Mr. Charlie Hardy, when a large, dark-complexioned fellow stepped towards me. I introduced myself and gave him the letter from Mr. Pence. I asked him if he had heard about the wreck, and found that even in 1908, bad news had a way of traveling fast. He had gotten the report from the depot agent, but he asked me many questions about the cattle that had been left behind. He wanted to know if I had noticed Mr. Gardner in Chicago about the wreck. I told him I had, and that the crippled cattle that had left had been turned over to the railroad, and they would ship the least injured ones to us in a few days. I was invited to the ranch house instead of the wagon where the other men were bedded down. They had a tent to cook in, which was luxury that I had never seen in a cow ranch. I was quite used to sleeping under the stars, using my slicker for a bed. After I changed clothes, I met Mrs. Goldie Hardy, and I had not expected to find a white woman there in the heart of the Sioux Indian Reservation. In Morristown, there was only a section house, and the depot combined when I got there. The little town was named for Nels Morris, a ranch proprietor. Charlie Hardy was originally from Texas. He homesteaded in and around Devil's Tower, 10 miles from Hewlett, Wyoming, around 1900. Before he went to work on the superintendent of the vast C7 spread, he and Goldie lived in Chicago, where he had stock and inspector for North and South Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming. Mrs. Hardy's folk came from an ox team for Hewlett, Wyoming, around 1883, when Deadwood, South Dakota, was in its earliest boomtown days. Deadwood was about 50 miles from Hewlett. Mr. and Mrs. Hardy were married in December of 1898. 3 o'clock the next morning after my arrival, I heard the train coming into the depot bringing the rest of our cattle from El Paso. I got up and had my clothes on before the train whistled at the station. As soon as I saw it on the switch that stock pens, I went to the other end of the house to wake the other hands. By daybreak, we had 1,800 head of cattle unloaded, and the train was leaving just as Mr. Hardy got up. We were all in the branding pens when he rode in. He watched for some time and asked me to go with him for a while. He wanted to know why I didn't wake him when the train came in. I wanted to know why the train came in. I told him we could get through the work, and that I had counted the cattle as we turned them into the big pen from the run to the loading pens. I counted every carload separately, and set each carload down, and was counting every draining pen full as they were turned out. He seemed satisfied with that. He didn't know that I could count. He told me to keep count of all the left the draining pens, and he would help hold them up to keep up them mixing with the other cattle on the range, as he wanted to put them in separate pasture to themselves. I climbed down from the fence and took my place at the squeeze with the branding iron. Every animal was branded and dipped by 2 that evening. My counts all tallied. When Mr. Hardy rode up again, he asked me about the count. I told him there was only 1,837 head of cattle in that load. He said, "Yeah, you're right. We are 3 short." "Yes, sir. I know there should have been 40 head in each car. One car had only 38, and another one had 39. I'll make out a report showing that the railroad company." "I believe you've shipped cattle before." He smiled at me and told me I'd done a good job. Next, we took the cattle to the dirty lodge pasture, which was 6 miles from the ranch. We had the cattle strung out for about a mile or more when we reached the gate. I had opened the gate with the help of the other men, and I had driven the lead cattle a mile into the pasture. I stopped at the tail end of the cattle was nearing the gate. I stopped as the tail end of the cattle was nearing the gate. I sat upon my horse, watching the hungry cattle scatter out over the green pasture, greedily eating the fresh grass. and they were allowed to roam at will. I was about to turn my horse homeward and rejoin the other cowboys when the lead cattle attracted my attention to something they had found. I watched them for a few moments and then rode forward to see what was causing the disturbance. When I rode near enough, I saw it was a white man lying on his back. He was fully dressed except his cap, which lay some feet away. I dismounted and walked up to him. I took a good look and then mounted and galloped away to a nearby hill and waved for the other boys to come. They came out. Well, they came, but only one seemed to take any interest in the dead man. The others just rode on off. On looking through the papers I'd taken from one of his pockets, I found a razor and a silver dollar. I found a notebook with F.T. Kelly written on the first page. I also found a letter of recommendation written by a man in Moorbridge, and it read, Moorbridge, South Dakota, February 14th, 1908. I know this man to be all okay. Take him as far as you can. Signed, J.Q. Hughes. A nice handkerchief wore the initials F.T. in the corner, which had been worked by some woman's hand. A pocket looking glass lay between his feet. He was lying between two wagon ruts, and from all appearances, he had been jerked out of the back of the wagon by his feet. There was a bullet hole through his head near the temple, and it had come out near the right eye. I soon mounted and headed for the ranch. I did not try to move the man because I had heard it was unlawful to move a dead man off the reservation until after he had been buried for 6 months. I also heard that any white man who wished to cross the Indian reservation in any way except by train must first get a permit issued by the Indian agent. Otherwise, he would be subject to arrest and fine for trespassing upon the Indian reservation, which was patrolled by an Indian police. Mr. Hardy notified the officials at Fort Yates to come and hold an inquest. It seemed awful to me to leave him out there exposed to the elements until the officials had come. The writer of the letter was found. In about 12 days, 2 of the doctors in the reservation came. Mr. Hardy, the doctors, and 6 of us boys went to hold an inquest and to bury the poor man. We had to render a verdict of death for unknown reasons. No one ever found out who he was. He was about 6 feet tall, auburn hair, sandy beard, fair complexion, and he had false teeth. He was well dressed, a nice-looking man. He had 2 spades to dig his grave. The soil was only 16 inches deep near where he lay. We struck a hard pan and almost as hard as rock, so we laid him to rest in a very shallow grave with a saddle blanket. No marker was made, thus he was buried, true cowboy style. The same year, the bodies of a woman and a girl about 2 years old were found by one of the cowboys. The 2 bodies were found in a clump of ash timber not very far from the old stage road and went to Fort Yates from Spearfish. Byrd Rose, who was in charge of the old L7 before it became the C7, said a white man, a woman, and a little child had stopped by the LV ranch 2 years before. They had left there saying they were going to Spearfish, a distance of about 128 miles. He thought it was likely the bodies had been found were those of the woman and child. The woman had the child clasped in her arms. No one could give any idea as to what became of the man and the wagon and the team. Many strange happenings in that country which no one could explain. Another incident happened while I was at the C7 one day in the company of George Adams, a line rider who stayed at the ranch. We saw a man coming toward the house. We were ready to leave, but we waited to see who it was and what he wanted. He came up talking to himself. He asked the way to Lemon. We told him that and rode off in the opposite direction. He was a white man and looked to be about 35 years old. He had long black hair that hung down his back most to his hips. Saw no arms of any kind on him. I only saw a big knife and a 6-shooter. He had a canteen swung over a fork and a saddle nut. He had no bedding that I could tell. The next morning I saw the mare he had been riding and the colt that he was following. The mare was hobbled, and they were about 2 miles down the river from the ranch. I looked about for a while for the man, but could find no trace. I felt sure he was hiding from the law, but it was evident the man had been out of his head. Many times I wished that I had followed him and had tried to help, but lots of men in that country would not let a stranger come near them. When they thought that they were close enough, they would change course. If you followed, they would warn you with a bullet. The next day after finding the dead men was spent gathering horses, and the real work began. The C7 had shipped 125 head of young horses out here the summer before, and had tried to break part of them. There were about 20 men at the ranch, and all but 4 were natives of that part of the country, and of the Swede nationality. There was one big red-faced fellow weighing about 300 pounds, strong, and could work like a team of oxen. I got my fill of roping horses while there. We got the horses all together, and each of us was given 2 gentle horses and 5 head of broncs, and it was either ride or walk, as we chose. I had a PX sorrel cut out for me. He had won a reputation among the Swedes as the fall before they He had won the reputation among the Swedes the fall before, and they were all eager to see me pack him. I felt the sorrel was my last horse to ride. When it came time, it took me and a big Swede to pack him. The Swede eared him down and pulled my neck, and while the Swede eared him down while I put my pack on him. I had taken him out on the corral to saddle him, since the corral was made of wire, and I didn't care to ride into it when my saddle was cinched good and tight. I mounted and told Big Willie to let him go. He turned loose its ear and threw his hat under him, and into the air it went, little done leveling the ground. But I conquered that bronc before I brought him back from a ride out of the country. That night, after we had all topped off our mounts, several of the Swedes had skinned and bruised heads and bodies. The next days then were spent branding cattle that came in nearly every day for WN pence, was sending them as fast as he could bargain for them. Since Mr. Hardy was fresh from the stockyards in Chicago, he was almost as much a stranger to the place as I was. It was on my 7th day at the ranch that he sent word that he wanted to show me over the ranch. The day was foggy and cloudy, which caused the mosquitoes to be swarming something fierce. We had to wear mosquito bars over our faces and necks to keep them from eating us alive. We wore gaunted gloves and cloaks, We wore gaunted gloves and cloaks enough that they couldn't get to our bodies. Those mosquitoes were terrible. Usually they only stayed 2 or 3 weeks, and this country was lovely again. Mr. Hardy and I spent 3 days riding while he showed me all he wanted me to do. Soon we became lost in the fog. I had to use my compass to see what course we were traveling. I knew if we had not changed our course, the wind had changed its course. We were all at that time going south, the wrong direction. Mr. Hardy told me he wanted to go north if we could keep up to it, and we would be a long way from where he wanted to go. "We'll go to the top of yonder hill and take a new start," he said. I did not answer, but kept pace with him best I could. We topped the hill, and after looking in every direction, Mr. Hardy struck his spurs into the horse's side and galloped away with me right behind him. After a mile or more had been covered, I drew rein beside him and handed him my compass. "What do you want me to do? Why do you want me to carry this thing?" he asked. "I thought you could keep your course better. You might use it to show which directions you're going," I said politely. He slowed his horse to a walk, and taking the compass, he asked if I thought it was right. It showed that we were going due south again. I assured him that I knew the compass was right. He said, "To hell with such weather. A man can't see a thing." Next, he cursed himself for starting out on a trip to inspect a country that was into a wilderness to him and me both. He asked me why it was we were continually going back south. I told him that the horse that was riding wanted to return to the ranch, and would naturally travel in that direction when he could have his way. Then he cursed the horse. He handed me the compass and told me to strike out due north. I turned my horse north and at a lively rate, and I kept with his fine saddle horse, Fraser, which he had shipped from Chicago. He finally ordered me to stop as we approached a nice clear stream of running water. He wanted to eat lunch and rest. I readily agreed with him. I unsaddled the horses and unpacked the pack horses and hobbled them out to graze. I gathered up wood and built a fire, cooked bacon and coffee, and after we had eaten, I cleared away the dishes and sat down to talk to Mr. Hardy. We each gave each other a brief history of our lives. He told me when Mr. Pence really knew how to pick good men. I wanted to know if I could ride a bronc. I told him I'd... Ugh. He wanted to know if I could ride a bronc. I told him I did not claim to be a real bronc buster, as I was too small and too weak to handle a bad horse. He told me they had 3 bad horses on the ranch and none of the boys could handle. He wanted to find a man who could ride them. He said he would give any man $15 a month above his wages, or $5 a head a month. He told me the horses had been brought from the PX Ranch in New Mexico to the C Ranch in Texas and had never been broken into a saddle. Mr. Hardy said as soon as we got back to the ranch, we would gather up the horses and start the spring and summer roundup. Then he brought the L7 cattle and horses to the Byrd Road. They had bought the L7 cattle and horses from Byrd Rose and Ed Lemon the fall before, and the cattle were scattered about the Missouri River to the Wyoming and Montana line and throughout the Dakotas. He said that we would have to run 2 wagons all summer and fall. Mr. Rose and Ed Lemon were at one time partners in the old L7 outfit, each owning a 1/6 interest, the balance being owned by a financier in Chicago and one in Kansas City. Ed Lemon was born in Bountiful, Utah, 1857. He died in 1945 in Lemon, South Dakota, the town named for him. Mr. Hardy told me we would have to work 1 north and railroad and 1 wagon south. He said that he had 3 men working the outside on other cow outfits, and he would have to keep a crew at the ranch to help bring cattle that would be shipped in. We made camp that evening near a beaver dam. I tried to tear down the dam so I could watch the beavers rebuild it. After tearing it up and where the water flowed out in the lake at a rapid speed, I went back to camp. It wasn't long before I saw 3 beavers standing in the water up to their waists. They would use their tails for paddles and never expose their bodies to view but a second at a time. It made me feel I'd done the poor little fellows a great wrong. I was really feeling sorry for them, as they worked to save the water that had made their home secure. I could hear them hard at work during the night, splashing in the water and mud in their flat tails. Yay. Be interesting to be buried in a town named after you. What time is it? 30 minutes before ads. I'll see what I can do. Chapter 10. Riding and Fighting. Mr. Hardy and I returned to the ranch 3 days later. I carried a baby antelope home to Mrs. Hardy. I told her that she had no pet except Charlie, and I knew she got lonely staying by herself so often. She seemed to be delighted with the little fellow. She named him Byrd. She had a pen built for him, and I brought 2 young cows with calves so she could have the milk for him. He soon became very gentle and grew very fast, but was always shy of strangers. We brought the horses up, and I cut out the 80 head of my Bermuda, and I was to start the wagon as soon as I could get everything ready. I was to go to the Missouri River and work back west to the Grand River and the adjacent territory for about 10 miles on each side of the river. The C7 ranch was about 40 miles one direction and 50 the other. I did not know any of the horses except the ones that were at the ranch when I came. I cut out the 3 outlaw horses in my bunch on purpose, though no one had ever pointed them out to me. I knew them to be the description Mr. Hardy had given me. I cut each man his mount of 7 horses, and I left the 3 outlaws in the pen. I told the men that if any of them would like to take them and ride them regularly in his mount, his wages would be raised per head a month. Neither of them said that he would take the horses, but I saw one of the boys, about 23, looked as if he wanted to say something, so I asked him if he wanted to try one. He said if anyone the others would, he would. He said, "Pick out one, Slim." He chose the PX Roan. "Now, won't someone take the other?" I asked. Curly said he would take the white-footed sorrel. I took the last one. I cut up my PX broncs and told a big fellow to bring me my saddle. I backed him up to one corner of the corral and got my saddle cinched upon him good. Then I backed him out of the gate that was nearby. Mr. and Mrs. Hardy were out to see the big show. They told me I'd better ride my horse inside the corral, but I wanted to give the little fellow a fair chance. I'd put my bridle on him and half hitch of his nose up to catch my rope. I checked him and jabbed a finger in his right eye to make him stand still until I could get my foot into the stirrup. He kept trying to pinch off the saddle, and he kicked me off once or twice, but when I got him as far as the fence as I wanted him, I went back aboard his back and slipped the bridle over his head. When I turned his head loose, he snorted, ducked his head, and bowed his back like a rainbow. He leaped into the air as high as he could go. He hit the ground here and there, stiff-legged and bouncing like a rubber ball and brawling for all he was worth. Everyone thought that the bridle had slipped off. The noose on him was what I counted on to cut off his breath by pulling it tight across his nostrils. I went up and got my derby on my head and began to pull the rawhide cord off of him. I dug my spurs into his sides as deep as I could. He jerked his head up and started out towards the far sides of the pasture at his best speed. I did not try to stop him, as he had a smooth, level country for about 3 miles, and I knew I could slow him down in half a mile. When we went out to well-winded himself, I began to scratch him everywhere I could with my spurs. I would try to pitch, and he was too badly in need of breath to make much headway. I circled him back to the corral and went trotting up to the gate. He made a few more attempts to unpack me, with no success. I told the boys to go and break their mounts before starting them on the drive. I told them that if they waited until we were off on a drive, the horse would throw them. They would be taking chances of losing the horses and their saddles, too. They decided to give it a try. Curly said it's pretty good through. He was a wicked pitching beast. The poor old Slim got thrown and kicked, and he never had the nerve or grit of a bulldog, and he tried it again. He scratched out it pretty good the next time. I staked my horse out that night, and after riding him the next day and whipping all the pitch out of him with my quirt, he never gave me any more trouble. I got my $5 raise. Old Curly rode his the next day, and he came so near to being thrown that he never got back on him again. Slim would not give up. I've been given men who knew the range since I was a stranger to it. I saw before leaving the ranch, however, that several of the men were none too friendly with me. None of them knew who was going to be the wagon boss, and they certainly didn't expect the job to be assigned to me. I saw that Big Will and Curly, who I had known from Midland, were going up to make trouble for me. They seemed to be creating a dislike for me among the other boys. I expected a hard fight with some of them before long. I guarded against that as much as possible. I knew that I would have to use a pistol or take some terrible beating, for there wasn't a man in the bunch that weighed less than 180, and I weighed about 140. We'd been out on the ranch only 9 days when I saw it was impossible for me to work with any advantage with the crew I had. I knew to disclose the 3 main junglers would mean that I would pitch battle, so I gave orders to start for the ranch on the double. I gave no reason for the change of plan, so the men knew there were going to be 6 weeks at least. They also knew that we were to have made our first camp on the old blanket crossing, then work a strip called the Mormon Strip. It was a piece of land 8 miles wide and 120 miles long. It was set aside by the government between the Rosebud and Standing Rock reservations for the purpose of herds for western Sparts. When we were about 20 miles from the ranch, I left the wagon and went on in. I rode up to Mr. and Mrs. Hardy while I was riding out around the ranch. Mr. Hardy was very displeased to see me and surprised. I told him why I was there, and he informed me that Mr. Pence had highly recommended me. Mr. Pence had told him I could work and handle these men. I told him I could, but that I wasn't used to handling men of their sort. They wouldn't work, and they wouldn't let the others work. He wanted to know who was making the trouble. I told him the cook, Curly, and Big Willie. He told me all 3 men were good help when they wanted to be, and that was the reason he had sent me with them. I was told to make out the 3 boys' time and leave it at the ranch, then flag the evening train to Lemon, and stay until I found men to work with me. First, I brought me a hat and lemon. I hadn't had one since the train wreck. I went to the saloons, where I found 2 men who looked to me like they would do, so we made a deal. They told me about an old cowboy in town named John, who was a good cook, providing he was kept away from whiskey. I hunted him up and made a trade with him. Next morning, I had breakfast in the cafe and found the two cowboys, but no cook. I went to jail and found him. Seems he had been a little nosy the night before. I paid him out and bought him a jug. The other 2 men helped me hoist him into the boxcar that was just leaving town. He weighed about 250, so I couldn't handle him alone. When I returned to the wagon, I found Hugh Gaynor, a wagon boss, Ben Steen, whom I had known in Midland, and Edward Smith. I heard Richardson had come along in one of the stock trains. He claimed to be from Oklahoma. He didn't have any sort of outfit and bedding or such with him. So the men who worked for Hugh chipped in and helped him out. I came up and he seized me, but did not speak. He began cursing one of my men while the man was gone. I told him the charges were uncalled for, and Ed called me an SOB, and asked me if I wanted a licking. We had a few words, and the fight began. "Crawl on! No one of you will hold off," I retorted. I had stripped myself of my chaps and spurs while he stood cursing me. He was about 6 feet 7 inches tall and skinny as a crane. That cut no ice with me, so at it I went. I could not reach his pig-shaped head or his pig-shaped nose or head, so I put my best licks in on his ribs. Once in a while I would put one over the pit of his stomach. These would always bring grunt, and that sounded good to me, for he was working on my mug at no slow speed. I tried to plant my toe box boot in his stomach, but he had grown a little too tall. I finally got tired of being hit in the gourd so often, so I dodged under his right arm, thus protecting my head and face from his bony fist. But all the more exposing the seat of my pants to the mercy of those wicked hands. I never before received such a spanking. He wiggled and twisted and cursed and gouged me in the ribs with his thumbs, but I kept my grip on his ribs. I unfastened his belt and pants in the waist before I knew it. He stumbled backwards and was taking me with him. As my head struck the ground, my mouth flew wide open. I managed to get to my feet in time to get a good lick on Ed's right eye as he raised up to get his clothes. Several of the boys wanted to separate us, but others thought it was a funny show. Ed made a rush for his horse, and I was for the washpan. My nose was about 4 times its natural size, and one eye was closed. I never expected to be able to comb my hair again. I had knots all over my head. I had to go back to the lemon to be sewed in several spots. Once my cook, John, got into the fight with Ed in the bunkhouse, and Ed worked him over good with a broom handle. It was a cussing, fighting rascal all the way. Everything worked fine on the range after my eyes and nose got down to their natural size. I just about worked back to the ranch, up the river where Hugh left the ranch after all the cattle had been shipped. The year where you left the ranch after all the cattle had arrived that would be shipped that year to the ranch. All the shipping from them on would be from the C7 ranch. You sent one of his hands to tell me where to meet him with my outfit the next day at noon. The man that he sent also told Edward Smith had been carrying a gun for me, and had told it among the boys that he would show them how to get rid of me. Mr. Hardy had sent a man about 2 weeks after we left the ranch with the mail. He also told me that Ed was carrying a gun. He said he had a 6-shooter and a .33. I paid no attention to them until one day as I rode up to the wagons, which were camped near each other, near the riverbank, I saw a horse tied up to a cottonweed near the Gainer's wagon. I went to my wagon, threw my bed off, and got my gun. I raised up to see Ed coming out of the cook's tent. He started for the horse, carrying his rifle. He did have the pistols on his hips, and I called him to stop. I said, "Now, Ed, is a good time to make your good threats." I moved in closer to him with my pistol in my hand. "You've got the advantage on me," he retorted. "I'll give you all the time you need." By this time, the men from Gainer's wagon had started between us, and the crowd was pretty well divided. I told everyone to stand back. He didn't make any effort to draw, so I went to him and pulled his gun from the scabbard and threw it in the river. I broke the stock of his .30 by hitting against a tree. The men gaped at me in disbelief. Smith ate his dinner, then rode off. Mr. Hardy sent him to another part of the spread to work. A man named Percy Smith took his place. Mr. Hardy came to us all mad and upset about Ed and me. I told him this: Mr. Hardy, no man is going to carry a gun for me very long. Either he will use it or get rid of it. I will quit now if you want me to. Oh, I don't want you to quit. I don't want any killings on this ranch. And he went back to the headquarters. But there remained some hard feelings between you and Ed, his cook, and Ben Steen. Ben had let Ed have the 30-30, and the cook had let him have the pistol. They wanted me to pay for them. I told them where they could shovel snow. It was my understanding that when Ed left the ranch, he owed the boys nearly $200, and Mr. Hardy had loaned him bedding and money, too. About the 1st of August, we began to put up the hay all hands, and the cook were kept busy until October. Then the shipping of beef steers and fall branding commenced in dead earnest for 60 days. I was cutting and keeping the cattle pushed off the fence on the south side. I fed and gathered the weak cattle Morris and Company had shipped, 1,500 two-year-old heifers from Midland to us. They had been bred to calf in May, and most of them had been force-fed through the winter. The snows of winter were something fierce. I promised myself that if I didn't freeze that winter, my bones would never bleach in the Dakotas. So I got so cold that at times I decided South America was the only place for me. Sometimes I thought of Myrtle Ashley, but I knew that was over. She and I never met again, but while in Dakota, we did write each other. Little did I realize my first wife-to-be, who would be the mother of my 5 boys, was reading the letters as Myrtle got them. During the haying season, I increased my forces from 11 men to 40, and the golden harvest was bountiful. We put up over 15,000 tons of the finest hay to feed through the winter I've ever seen. Hugh Gaynor returned from Mr. Hardy's place, homestead, near Hewlett, Wyoming, and was running the haying outfit too. Hugh had also gotten into some trouble, and Mr. Hardy had sent him to Wyoming for a spell. The hay was cut and stacked in long ricks and fenced to be fed, and turned in case of severe storm. Large quantities of hay were put up in the land camps and all the ice cutter camps as well as the ranch headquarters. We never had a still moment. Nerves often got on edge, and the hours were long, and there were no time for folly. The fall shipping called for all our forces, so Hugh Gaynor and I joined our wagons and began gathering beef cattle for market. Oh, it's definitely getting tongue-tied in that. Good thing I edit the videos after. There's a carbine in chat, if anyone is so inclined. Ouch. Let me see how long the next chapter is. If you ever hear me hesitating while I'm reading this, it's probably mentally fixing typos. I've seen a lot of them in this book. Kind of makes me want to retype it and see if I can republish it. Especially since the original author's dead now. She died just a few years ago, I think. I don't know if the copyright was ever renewed on this one since it was kind of early. It was a little printing press that made this, Feather Press in Snyder, Texas, so I don't expect them to have considered redoing it. Ouch. Okay. I may go ahead and cut the stream short. Too many things I have to work on. So See if we can find some raid. What do I have a Bing window open? Okay, I see Dusk, I see Corey, I see Jiva, I see Billy, I see Soulstone. Black Dragon is reading. Mostly Harmless is playing Art Knights. Not seeing a lot of readers on tonight. Let's say, everyone here like Mass Effect? Okay, well, I will try to see everyone tomorrow. Hopefully there won't be any problems and we can get some serious fairy tales done. Maybe finish the book. I don't know. I think there's 9 stories left. But I'll see you then.
In the hollow of the night, shadows weave and twist. The wolf has told his stories, wrapped in mystic mist, lurking in the silence where the echoes softly play. The echoes of forgotten tales, dimming as they sway. The hours drip like candle wax, slowly melting gold. Lands of frost and twilight, secrets yet untold. The forest breathes a shiver, its ancient heartbeats thrum. Underneath the silver glow, the wild whispers come. Time to close the book, let the pages fall. You've roamed the winding paths, now heed the twilight.